Alright, so we have Mishnah 2 and Mishnah 3 of the 5th pair. The Maharal lumps them together and does the 2 as a pair, so I'm going to cheat and do the two as a pair as well. So it says there were 10 generations from Adam to Noah, right? Asra Doros me Adam va'ad Noach, v'hodia kama erech apayim lefonav, in order to show how patient God is, right? Erech apayim. Shekol hadoros chayu machisin uvain, because every single generation made God madder and madder and madder and madder. They were worser and worser and worser. Ad shechevi aleichem et mehamabel, until he finally brought upon them the waters of ensoulment of the Mabul. Right? Then it says Asra Daros, and there are 10 generations. Mi Noach v'ad Avraham. There's 10 more generations from Noach to Avraham. The Chodia kama erech apayim lefonav, same exact language, in order for God to make it clear how patient God was. Shekol hadaros chayu machisin uvayin, and they were increasingly wicked. Right? Shaba Avraham Avinu v'kiba schar kulam, until Avraham came along and took all the schar. There's a couple things that are interesting about these two as a pair. One, in theory, the Averos of the generation of Avraham were worse than the generations leading up to Avraham. We're coming up to the Tower of Bavel and the whole Nimrod debacle, which we'll talk about in a second, were worse than the Averos of the generations of Noah. Yet Noah, what happens? He comes to 10 generations and God wipes the whole place out, kills everybody. Right? He basically denudes the world of souls. And in Avraham, what does it say he does? He said, he took away their brownie points and gave the brownie points to Avraham. Right? So what's the mistake, or what's the damage of the generations of Noah? What did they do wrong? Right? So the typical idea was, and you can see it today, everybody stole a tiny bit. Right? If a guy had a push cart, a guy was an apple vendor, right? He'd set up in the market his apples, and everyone would, it's flash mob. They would all run in and grab one apple and run away. Because the reality is one apple is not enough to prosecute. Right? It's a whole group of people. You can't really identify any one particular criminal. Right? It's not enough to go and take him to court, take him to trial. You're not going to put a guy, and it's done. So they got some minor little benefit, and the guy is totally wiped out. I'm having a discussion with someone. Really, our generation now is the first time since Noah that this concept of the flash mob has come back. You know, that a bunch of teenagers will run into a 7-Eleven in Chicago, and 40, 50 guys will run in, and everybody will grab something and run out. It's like, one counter guy can't stop them. And if he does try to stop him, he's likely to get killed. The cost, right? It's just who cares?
And they know they're on tape.
They don't care, because it's below the threshold that anyone's going to really do anything to them. It's a lack of civility. It's a pecking people to death, right? But it's person against person. It's that your life is of so little value that my pleasure. It's like, who cares what happens to you? We don't really care if you get completely destroyed, as long as we get our candy bar. Right? It's a level of oppression, but it's person against person. So where do we see the Avera in the generations of Avraham? What's the biggest one that they did wrong? Right. So there's a couple things, but one is when they're building the Tower of Bavel. Right. So what happens to the Tower of Bavel? So it's the plain of the Tigris River. There's no trees. They built with adobe. There's no trees, there's no wood, there's no forest, there's no nothing. How do you build? So you take straw or grass and you mix it in with mud. You basically take and you lay little, runners in the ground, and you mix straw into the mud and you let it dry, and you pick it up. You have a brick that's held together by the fibers of the straw. Similar to what they did, right, in the floodplains of Egypt when you get to the Strait of Access. It was expensive to make a brick. It was difficult to make a brick. There weren't that many of them. So when they built the ziggurats, when they built the towers, it says that they would take and march up the towers carrying these bricks, right, to build it taller and taller and taller. So if a guy fell off the tower with his load of bricks, they would mourn the economic loss of the bricks. They didn't care about the guy. Right? Guys you can replace. Right? It's easy to get more slaves. It's easy to get people. People are not valuable. Economically, there's a tremendous cost to a brick. Right? Now again, you always have to, in safety issues, you have to make, cost-benefit analysis things. I mean, if it cost $100,000 or $1 million per life saved, right? To say you have some bridge, right? And you can, save for $1 million, you could save one life per year. Is it worth spending $1 million? You have to kind of figure it out, right? There was the discussion, the reason that, Ford got in trouble with Pinto back in the 70s is they realized that the placement of their gas tank was such that in a collision, the gas tank would explode, or likely to explode. People were already dying, and they calculated how many people were likely to die in Pinto explosions for that model year. Then they calculated how much it would cost to fix the model. Then they calculated how much they're likely to pay in settlements for the 17 people who are likely to die. And they said, you know what? Pay the settlements. It's cheaper to pay the settlements than to fix the product. On the other hand, I said, no one would buy a car. You could make cars death-proof. You could make it so that no one would ever die in a car. It's $1 million per car. But no one would be able to buy cars. No one would be able to use a car. So, there is some sense that you have to make some sort of cost-benefit analysis. But the model in Bavel is, if a person died, they didn't care. It wasn't a problem. But if there was an economic loss, it was a tragedy. That they would mourn the brick, but not the person. On the flip side, what was the distinguishing trait of the society? It says how did God punish them? Remember how God punished them when they tried to build a tower? What did he do? Languages. Division. He broke them up. Why? Because what was their key trait? They were all close. Right? They were all unified. Right? They were unified in, we hate God and we're going to go up to heaven and knock him down and kick him. But right, God's got nothing to tell us. We're going to kick him out of heaven. But at least they were unified. They were all on the same team. They were working together. They had a goal. They talked to each other. They respected. If you die, you die, right? But there was not discord. In the preceding generations, right? The generations of Noah, the battle was a battle of people cheating and destroying other human beings. In Avram's generation, it was people being disloyal to God. God is willing to put up with you being disloyal to him. He'll work with you on that. He's not willing to forgive as easily you going out and destroying his children. Right? So you see the punishment that comes from the guys who are Hamas, who are oppressing people, is much worse, much more severe than the punishment that God brings for the people who are just rebellious to him. Right? It says, all of us in our lives, as we grow up, we're going to find times that we're rebellious to God, that we're not quite so happy with him, we're not so comfortable with him, we've got an issue with him, you talk back at him. Right, with this whole cancer thing, and I got angry at him, I didn't necessarily call him names, but I didn't speak to him so nicely. I worked through it, right? But there's times that people, if you have times in your life, he'll work with you on that. But for you to go out and say, I'm going to abuse people, he's not so comfortable with that. Right? That's the same thing when you come to Yom Kippur. You can do tshuva with, on Yom Kippur for the stuff you've done to God. Not so easily for the stuff you've done to people. You got to go back to people. So that's the difference in the generations. But so now you have two guys, Noah and Avraham, who are each tasked with the job of save the world. Your world is breaking. It's separating from holiness. One, in Noah's generations, it's destroying the relationship of man to man. In Avram's, it's destroying the relationship of man to God. But they're each tasked with go save the world. So what are their strategies? So Noah, he retreats. He looks at the world and says, it's corrupt, it's evil, it's broken. You guys are losers and you stink. And there's nothing I can do about it. But I can save the world by saving my family. If I step back and separate, I can't stop you. God said save the world. Okay, so I'm going to build a teva. I'm going to build an ark. I'm going to build a ghetto, a shtetl, an insular and insulated community and put a wall around it and keep my friends, my family away from you. Now Noach knows he's losing something that's good, but he's willing to give up the good that he loses in order to save eventually everything. I mean, he succeeds, he saves everything. He saves everything by letting everyone else die, but he does succeed in saving everything. But it's a withdrawal. He doesn't try to waken the world up to the damage they're causing. He doesn't try to change them. He just says, you guys lost. And it's me and my family, and we'll go forward. So what does Avraham do? So Avraham takes a different approach. Avraham goes to Kiryat Arba, to the four corners, the crossroads of the world. Right? There's a trade route that runs from Africa into the Middle East. Right, into the you have the Nile Valley and the Mesopotamian valleys, which are the two main civilizations of the world. And there's a trade route that runs from Egypt to Mesopotamia. There's also a trade route that runs from the Mediterranean due east. Go to that crossroads, the crossroads of the world, and he builds a hotel, builds a truck stop, an inn, right? And he welcomes everybody in, and he feeds them, and he clothes them. And when they eat, he says, listen, this is a bracha from God. So he doesn't go insular. He doesn't shut everyone. Right? Instead of taking and closing himself off, he opens himself up. He goes to the center of the world, and he says, appreciate the goodness of Hashem. Appreciate what God is capable of giving you. And he tries, right, intellectually to go out and reach out to the world and change the world that way. So they each take a slightly different approach. And in our own generation, we have the same question. How are you going to save the world? Right? And there's a balance between the two strategies. Just as an aside, I heard once, we like to say, Avraham is clearly the better strategy. But move a little bit farther forward in the book. When Avraham goes down to Egypt, who goes with him? Not Avraham, but when the Jewish people, right, when Yaakov, right, goes to Egypt, who goes with him? Just the 70 souls of his own family. In the end, even though Avraham set up the truck stop and taught everybody and made souls and tried to build a world, in the end, all he got was his own family anyways. It's not, right? Man proposes, God disposes. It's our job to set out, but it's, God will decide what's going to happen. But the difference between the two is Noach took responsibility for his own family, and that's all he ended up with. Avraham took responsibility for the whole world, and he tried to elevate the whole world. And said he can't make them listen. He can't make them follow him, right? But he tried. He went out after everybody. And for that, he gets the scar of everyone. Right? That he invested in them. He said, listen, I want you. I love you all. I'm going to save everybody. It's not just my clan. I'm here for everyone. So that's why in the generation of Noah, right, the world's destroyed. And he slips through. Because that's all he was trying for. The generation of Avraham, he did what he could to build souls. And so he gets the benefit of everything that he built. But in the end, it didn't stick. That he was not able to incorporate it. Right? He was a sole proprietor of the relationship with God. Right? That's the difference. We'll see later in the you'll see later in the 6th parak. It talks about God's possessions. It says one is Avraham. Right? It says a separate one is Israel. Right? Avraham is the guy who says, I'm standing up to take responsibility. I'm connecting to God. He was the first person to ever connect to God. Israel was a corporation. Right? The difference of the Jewish people is we now have the same way. A corporation has continuity. You have a way to transfer it from generation to generation. Right? It's a separate piece. Israel, Yaakov brings incorporation. Avram was never able to get to that. So by the next generation, his little sole proprietor business of bringing people close to God was wiped out. People didn't stick. As long as he was there being dynamic, it was great. But once he wasn't teaching, right? Yitzhak was his successor. He lost all the customers. He was MySpace. He lost all the customers to Facebook Ball or whoever it was, and they're all gone. Right? Avram built the biggest business in the. Kid couldn't hang on to it. Right? So they had to start over again. Once Yaakov incorporated, then you have continuity going forward. So that's those two Mishnayot together. The two distinctions are to look at what was it that was just the separation between the two generations. One was a destruction of people, and the other is a destruction of relationship with God. And the second is to look at the distinction between the two reactions. One was to close up, and the other was to open up. Right? In the end, Avraham wins. Avraham is considered the father of the Jewish people. right, of the incorporation of God in the world, because he's the one who said, listen, I may not get y'all, but I'm certainly going to try. So that's our mission.